This is the hearing of the Employment and Medical Marijuana Task Force. Thank you. The first person to come up would be Mr. Alex Toney, representing himself, Mr. Ryan Bales, representing himself, and Mr. Tony Landry for Veterans Actions Council. Mr. Toney.
Hi, my name is Alex Toney. I'd like to start by saying thank you all for having me today and allowing me to speak to you, and thank you all for what you're doing. A little about me. I'm a college graduated from LSU in 2008. I served in the U.S. Army as a Special Forces medic in Afghanistan, and I continue to serve today my country and my community as a professional firefighter here in the state of Louisiana. I'm here today to talk to you guys, and it seems like we're pretty much all on the same page about discrimination and what I believe, and many other firefighters that I'm here representing today believe, that we should not be discriminated against for our profession, and we should have equal rights that every other citizen in the state is allowed to enjoy. And when it comes to this medical freedom I'm speaking about and this discrimination, I'm speaking specifically about medical marijuana. And there is a stigma and a taboo and consequences that we face for choosing that medicine, which we have all decided as citizens is medicine. I don't believe, and all these other firefighters I'm speaking about don't believe, that if a doctor recommends something that is effective for treatment and also safe, and a proven much safer alternative than other medicines out there that are habit forming and addictive, I think that we should be able to make that choice without repercussions. I think that I would have been remiss if I didn't come and speak to you today about that, because I work in a field where psychological issues such as PTSD are not only commonplace, but they're actually presumptive, meaning that sometime in my career, I will see something, be involved in something, do something that I will be mentally and emotionally accountable for the rest of my life. And if I have an option and an opportunity to use a medicine that can help mitigate those issues that I may or may not see in the future, I think I should be able to. And I think that you as a society, you people, the citizens of the state, you trust us to make good judgments and good decisions. I see it every day when I respond to emergencies. I see the worst case scenarios and worst things that you can imagine. And I show up and I see people's faces, and it's panic and it's terror and it's horror. And they see me and it's hope. And I'm there to help. So I know that the public trusts us, and we don't take that for granted. We take that responsibility very seriously. And we don't plan on destroying that or ruining that over something like this. We simply ask to be afforded the same respect and responsibility that you give us to make these good decisions and good judgments in our professional lives, to be able to carry that over into our personal lives and make those good decisions and good judgments regarding medicines that we may or may not be able to take. And if a doctor does recommend it, I don't think that anybody should be able to get in the middle of that and say that we shouldn't be able to take that. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Do we have any questions? Sir, thank you, sir, for your service to this country and to this community. We are very grateful, and I think I speak for the whole task force there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Robbins-Brown?
All right, I'm going to keep coming back to this recommendation versus prescription thing, sorry, and I want to understand what would happen. So if you were taking a prescription opiate, or you were applying for the job, or you're on the job and they do a drug test, and you're taking a prescription opiate and, that shows up, what would happen to you?
If I was given a random, as far as the information that I have, if given a random or reasonable suspicion or post-accident drug test and I had a prescription for an opiate and there was metabolites in my system, that would be the end of it. They would see my prescription. If it was valid, then it wouldn't even go to my employer. Like Mr. Prevost said, it would stop right there and it would be technically considered a negative test, regardless of the metabolites in my system. That's the information that I have.
And according, going by the information that you have, and maybe that you've experienced, with other firefighters, what would happen if you have a medical marijuana recommendation?
As it is right now, that is kind of a gray area. However, it seems to be leaning towards that person would face consequences regardless if they have the recommendation or not. If those opiates are above the thresholds that Mr. Prevost spoke about, then they would be a positive test regardless of and that's just, like I said, it's a gray area, and there is some debate about that and controversy, but as it is right now, that's the information I have, that by the administration, it would be determined as a positive.
And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Robbins Brown, they had a long-serving fire captain here in Baton Rouge, a medical patient who recently has lost his job due to medical use.
Yes, sir. My name is Ryan Bales. Thank you for your service. Thank you all for hearing us this morning. I served with the 82nd Airborne 2004 to 2008 in Afghanistan and Iraq. Got back 2008, got diagnosed with PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and been on barbiturates and Zoloft and stuff like that since. And when medical cannabis became a thing in Louisiana, I decided to give it a try. I was able to quit basically every medicine that I was taking from the VA except my cholesterol medicine. But when I got out the service, I went and started working in the chemical plants where it's looked at the same way. I mean, if I have an opiate or a barbiturate prescription, it's not a thing, even for a random or anything like that. But if I went and had a random or my yearly physical where they pull hair and I have medical cannabis in my system, I would be terminated. So I'm just here to try to bring awareness to that. I mean, y'all seem to all know what's going on, and I was really impressed the way that y'all were talking about the breathalyzer that they have talked about. I mean, it's like y'all said, a long way from production, but as long as we're moving forward.
Does any task force members have a comment or a question? Seeing none. Thank you for your service, sir. It's very much appreciated by everybody here on the task force, and thank you for sharing your story today.
Thank you, Chair Caldwell, and then members of the committee. Thank you for the hard work that you're doing on this important subject. My name's Tony Landry. I served 6 years in the U.S. Navy and left the military with some back injuries and went through all the opiates and prescription medicine that the VA gave me, and finally found some relief with cannabis, and I was able to avoid all the other medicine. I'm reading from the UN Right to Health fact sheet number 31. In 1948, after all the atrocities of the World War II and the human rights violations and all, the UN came up with some basic rights to health that humans were entitled to. And part of the entitlements include three main points: the right to a system of health protection, providing equality of opportunity for everyone to enjoy the highest attainable level of health; the right to prevention, treatment, and control of diseases; access to essential medicines. So, what we're talking about here is basically regulating, because of the long life of metabolites in people's system, we're talking about regulating their health, off-duty use health. Nobody's promoting possession or use of cannabis on the job. This, if for instance, if you had a police officer that got into a traumatic event and got TBI, if we're going to prevent police officers from using cannabis in off-duty hours, then we're going to be affecting their right to health. Israel just came out in 2017, cannabis could treat traumatic brain injury. They discovered, they took rats and gave them TBI and noticed a high level of 2-AG, which is part of our endocannabinoid system, was found in those rats. So they develop in a nasal spray when somebody gets injured in combat or for anything. If you have TBI, they give you this nasal spray of THC, and it's a neuroprotectant. It helps you protect against further nerve damage. So by eliminating that option for our police officers and firefighters and EMT, we could be drastically affecting their health for long term, for unscientific reasons. Mr. Juge says he wrote this policy in 1989. The endocannabinoid system wasn't even discovered until 1990. And since then, they've had a miraculous amount of studies done, on the benefits of this. So what we're doing is we need to determine safety-sensitive jobs. As a cook using hot grease, is that a safety-sensitive job? Should we ban the cooks from using cannabis? Is a pharmacist that's measuring fentanyl out, is that a safety-sensitive job? What about the pharmacist that's measuring out cannabis? Is that safety-sensitive? So there's going to be some determinations individual employers are going to have to make on what are safety-sensitive jobs. You can't just put a blanket policy, statewide policy on all these employees. You're going to have to determine, individual employers are going to have to decide what's safety sensitive. And this Title 23 needs to be, seriously looked at right away, because, Delta 8 THC derived from hemp is very non-psychoactive, give you a little relaxation. So you could actually get fired just using something legal, just as legal off the counter, So these are unscientific methods that we're using to fire people and affect their whole life. They just need to be looked at and ended. Really, it really needs to be ended. And so states are determining including the right to action clause. It raises uncertainty for need for judicial interpretation about whether employees can file discrimination cases, and partner focus on labor employment matters. These matters are individual employee matters. They're not something we can just throw a blanket across the state. So thank you for your hard work on this, and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. Thank you to everyone else on the panel today, for your testimony, for your service. But Mr. Landry, really thank you for bringing a wealth of knowledge to this committee, because you really, struck me when you said about the CBD. That's sold in stores across America, and a patient or, anyone could just take that and test positive, but it's legal. So those are things that we do have to take in consideration. So really thank you for bringing that point.
Thank you, Dr. Stowe.
Thank you for your service to the country, sir, and thank you for always being a good contributor in these committee hearings and the task force. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
The next two speakers I have is Miss Angela Broussard, Bo Roddy.
I wanted to thank all the former speakers and the committee members for letting the public speak, and thank you for your service and for your valuable comments. Over the last few months, I've gotten a lot of calls from firemen, and to me, we're talking about them as firemen. To me, they're just fellow patients, and that's why I'm here to advocate for fellow patients that happen to also be firemen, first responders, EMTs, law enforcement officers, because patients are stronger together. So I feel like we need to kind of just get off the whole testing issue, because like in 2 years, it's going to be like testing housewives for Starbucks. Some of us can handle a double shot espresso, some of us can't. And it's going to be in everybody's blood, medicinally or recreationally. And if we want to continue recruiting and retaining firefighters and EMTs, we better look forward to that situation right now, or we're going to be at a loss for employees. And let's talk about what firefighters do for our community. It's not all kittens and trees and babies being born at home. A lot of it is sad. They see more trauma in one day than most of us see in our whole lives. You just heard stories about it. They're worse Those are the tamed down stories, okay? We can't abandon people that we ask to serve us, to serve our communities, because many of them have given away their peace of mind, helping our grandmothers during their heart attack, helping our sons during their golf cart incidents, helping us. And one thing to consider is the number of unresponsive calls firemen, EMTs, law enforcement officers go to. So imagine that you're a firefighter and you're leaving an unsuccessful resuscitation at an unresponsive call. In other words, someone's died, likely of an overdose. You can look at the statistics, they're increasing for Louisiana. So that fireman now, we want them to go home and pop an opioid after they just held someone's hand because their loved one overdosed. That is insanity, okay? We need to quit all this focus on this medication. Our state's marketing it as game day blunts. It doesn't sound that scary when you look at it like that. My favorite strain of marijuana is called titty sprinkles. Yes, that's the name of the plant. I'm not trying to be gross. That's the name of it, and it's a good one, by the way. So we're acting like it's the end of the world, denying firefighters, EMTs, this precious medication that takes them off of a gallon Ziploc bag of harmful pharmaceuticals. Meanwhile, raking in millions on titty sprinkles and game day blunts. It doesn't work out with logic, y'all. Doesn't. You're either going to pick this 1980s notion of marijuana, or you're going to side with the patients. In this case, we're talking about firefighters and EMTs. You know, it's as a former opioid dependent patient whose life was changed by marijuana, I can't sit back while any patients are being denied what may or may not be a life returned to them. And you need to think about it, not as numbers, smash, fush. I know all that's important, but you need to think about the people, the lives you could potentially be saving by allowing firefighters who possibly saved your grandma last year just the opportunity to put a tincture under their tongue at night so they can get some sleep, or smoke a joint so they can eat because they're nauseated from the trauma they've seen just that day. We're up here arguing about article whatever. I think we need to argue for the people, for the patients. Now, we have a program. We just need to make sure people can access it and afford it, and that we're not discriminating and stigmatizing this medication that the firemen have just told you has helped them. We're wasting time, and when we waste time when we're talking about opioid dependency and alternatives, you want firefighters on opioids and a 10-year Ambien bender, or you want them to smoke a joint and take a tincture, eat an edible? What sounds better? Ask a firefighter. I think they'll tell you who they'd rather work with. So when we're thinking about all these regulations, I beg you not to forget the human component, the lives, their families, because that's what matters. None of this other stuff matters. It matters to save lives. And do we want our firefighters on a gallon Ziploc bag of harmful pharmaceuticals that would make a Hinkley snowball look less harmful? Or do we want them just to smoke a joint and take a tincture that our state has already approved? Seems like the choice is easy according to Mr. Robbins Brown. I think we could just add a definition to existing law and call it a day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
My name is Bo Roddy. I own a company called Simply LA here in Louisiana. It is a wholesale hemp company. I also, at the same time, started a nonprofit called the Seraphim Movement. I come from Livingston, Louisiana. My family is from Terrebonne Parish, Houma. My father died in 2008 of a Schedule 4 glioma tumor center of his brain. When my father actually lived 6 years with this tumor. When my father was diagnosed, there was no medical marijuana to be found in Louisiana. I'm not sure what you guys are talking about laws back in 98 or whatnot, but in 2000, I could not find any my dad could not find any medical marijuana. When my dad asked me for marijuana because he knew it would help him, he actually was taking chemotherapy and radiation at the same time. It was a radical new thing Duke University offered because after we took him to brain surgery, of course, he wanted to do the aggressive. He had never smoked marijuana besides his high school years. He was a great father to me. He taught me very well, but he was not a quote-unquote pothead. He asked me for marijuana. I procured him marijuana back then. But before I gave it to him, I had the sense to test it. I had friends in the scientific community that would test marijuana for me back then. I don't know if you guys know this, but every single day in Louisiana, people are smoking marijuana. People are doing that anyway. No matter what you may feel, or I may feel, no matter what the people behind me may feel, people are going to smoke marijuana. And if they cannot procure it through an actual place, then you're going to find hard metals. You're going to find I found paraquat on every single sample that ever came from Mexico. And it's because Mexican farmers, that is a very, very cheap and very effective chemical to use. Now, am I supposed to give? I was in a very, very, very hard situation a long time ago where I found myself having to break the law to grow cannabis here in Louisiana when it was against the law. And do you want to know what I actually had to put on the line? That holds a 25-year sentence, sir. 25 years. I'm here because I've been here for many, many years. I was here last year. I watched you guys talk right across the hallway, December 16th. Essentially, I watched the state, called the state up, and asked the state these serious questions like, what is the legal limit of intoxication? You guys didn't know this, but 2 days before that, I had actually sat down and met with the Sheriff's Association. I have been very, very, very much so in touch with my local law enforcement, which actually gave me access to the Sheriff's Association. And 2 days before the Sheriff's Association walked in that meeting, they asked me one question. They said, Bo Roddy, you can help us out with a lot. What is the legal limit of intoxication? Because the moment we make it legal, somebody's going to get in a car wreck and cause bodily injury. We have to have that limit, right? It's a year later, and we're still asking the same question to the same people. If this was alcohol, how long would it take to develop a test? If this was an insurance company or something like that, how many people do you think would be sitting behind me lobbying for it? If this was alcohol or tobacco, this place would have to be a different venue because there would be so many people. The reason there's not people behind me right now in a mass, only these few people, is because it's a very taboo thing to speak about. You can lose your job. You can lose your children. My grandchild was born on October 27th with drugs in his system. Now, I cannot foster my grandchild right now because social services doesn't know the difference between a damn hemp license and a weed farm. They called me up and asked me if I owned a weed farm. Now, I'm trying to let you guys know that you are going to find yourselves, or the Louisiana in a state is going to find themselves in a lots and lots of lawsuits. They really are. To be talking about this right now, I'm really having to hold back my emotions because I've traveled. I lived in Colorado for 4 years breeding plants. I've lived in Southern California. I've submerged myself in this industry. I cannot even find not one doctor or even a veterinarian who said a dog has died because it got into cannabis. No, not one death ever. And we've been using this plant for thousands of years. I am a creator. I create things. I love to invent things. When people were talking about the CRISPR protein and whether or not we should do it and use it in the human body, I was thinking about the cannabis plant. I would love the opportunity to start commerce in this state, but our hands are really, really tied. Very tied. I did not know that there was a 3-minute limit. I'm very sorry. There's a lot more I'd love to speak to you guys about. I've emailed other members. They're not here anymore, or they're not a part of this particular. I don't exactly understand how all this works, but I do understand how cannabis works. I've been growing it. I've been using it. I have been studying it for over 20 years now. I've moved to different states because I wanted to get an education that was not offered in this state at that time, and still is not. As it looks right now, one day, if I do ever own a cannabis industry, I will have to compete with people that don't have any overhead. I'll have to compete with schools. I have to compete with people that got an early start on all this and really, I seen cannabis as a hope. I seen cannabis as an industry. I seen cannabis as something that could bring people out of poverty. And I know a lot of people, including myself, who was born into poverty, and this is our way out. This is our way out. We have no other way. And so whether or not Louisiana wants to take us in and say, okay, make us some tax dollars, guys, or we go find another state to set up shop in, but this really is where we're at. And I want to thank, first of all of you guys back here that served our country. Thank you to our veterans. I really appreciate. And Mr. Tony, you've been such a help and a blessing to me. Thank you. I'd like to thank you, ma'am. It seems like you're very much into it. And I'd like to thank you guys for your time and your efforts. I can tell that on quite a few of your faces, you have concern. And that's all I was looking for, honestly. That's all I was looking for. Again, I have so much more to tell you guys, but I don't want to go over your time limit. Thank you so much. God bless. I appreciate you.